Welcome back, everyone, to the Global Law School Summit organized by Jindal Global University. My name is Prateek Bhattacharya. I'm an Associate Dean and Associate Professor at Jindal Global Law School. In this session, this special dialogue 5, we will be discussing redefining the future of legal education, digital transformation, and virtual sustainability. I'd like to welcome our distinguished speakers, Mr. Phalgun Kompalli, who is the co-founder of Upgrad, and Professor Anand Prakash Mishra, who is an associate dean and associate professor at Jindal Global Law School, as well as a director of law admissions. We are also waiting for Professor Vivekanandan, who's the vice chancellor of Hidayatullah National University, who will be joining us shortly. In the meantime, what we thought we would do is we just introduce the topic and just get the ball rolling on that topic discussion. So just to introduce what this particular session is about. We are, of course, now in a digital age, very clearly and very unarguably. And we are now more than 2 decades into the 21st century, and the marvels of new information and communication technologies, what's known as ICTs, have made our day-to-day lives increasingly connected and global. The knowledge and information of the world is literally available to us at the click of a button, and the technological revolution has become an indispensable part of postmodernism. Never before has education witnessed such a marked upheaval, with technology helping teachers push conventional boundaries to improve their students' learning outcomes to the best extent possible. ICTs have also been proven to facilitate positive results when they are used for conceptual understanding of the subject as opposed to mere memorization of content. In this rapidly changing landscape, it is imperative to address the importance of self-improvement through exploring new and innovative pedagogies in legal education to ensure that the coherence which ought to be galvanized by global legal studies is kept intact as universities transform themselves into the digital space. While the incidence of globalization has been characterized by historical discontinuity, legal studies must be resilient and protect their identity and heritage, without which common law doctrines such as stare decisis may struggle to survive. It therefore becomes the job of law schools to keep past practices linked to future expectations in a sustainable manner. This can be done by making use of blended modes of learning, such as the flipped classroom model, use of ICT tools to supplement the talk and chalk teaching learning method, and digitalization of library resources, with an aim to prepare law students for the globalizing world. Now, the need for virtual sustainability of legal education goes hand in hand with the need of law schools to invest in capacity building of teachers for encouraging them to adapt their pedagogies to the 21st century classroom. The COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated this digital transformation of the law school classroom and underscored the redundancies of some of our practices, ideologies, and pedagogies. As even courts of law and law offices contemplate permanently shifting to a hybrid mode of work, conventional practices such as paper filing of court documents and in-person meetings or hearings may not continue. Moreover, the limitations that were previously imposed by distance and jurisdiction have been dispelled with, permitting flexibility to where legal professionals are based out of. In the same vein, global legal education should endeavor to take a page out of the COVID-19 playbook and complement face-to-face classroom activities with pedagogical and curriculum reforms that leaves behind the traditional unidirectional oral transmission of information that has engendered a climate of rote learning in India and demotivated degree earners, and an ICT-driven, learner-centric teaching learning environment would encourage students to engage in active and independent learning and also increase their access to global resources. And so with that, what I'd like to do is just to get the ball rolling, I'm going to just go into a Q&A format. My first question to Mr. Phalgun Kompalli is regarding generally, I suppose, education as well as legal education. Now, as legal education enters the digital space, how would you gauge the willingness of prospective students to welcome this digital transformation? Because, of course, there's legal education, but generally in education in India, there may be some degree of skepticism or hesitation, which is coming from the students, from prospective students. So in your experience, have you witnessed such hesitation, such skepticism, and how willing are the students to adapt to a digital learning environment?
Sure, great. Thanks a lot, Professor Prateek. Pleasure to be here. To answer your question, I think in our experience of digital education over the last 7 years, one of the things we have observed is that initially there is always hesitation for people who are used to doing things a certain way. It could be the faculty, the universities, the learners, the corporates who hire students. All of them have certain hesitations. But I think there are two parts to it. The first part is there is a massive set of audience who are very eager and hungry to learn, but do not have access to this existing infrastructure. It's because they stay somewhere else, they cannot leave their job. There are multiple reasons, right? So this uptake and acceptance starts with people who do not have the option of full-time on-campus education. And they are saying that, okay, look, I don't have an option, so let me start with this particular strong value proposition that I have, which I can do in order to accelerate my career. So that's where it typically starts. And once we are able to deliver very strong experiences and outcomes for them, both in terms of learning outcomes and career outcomes, I think that's when the tide starts to shift, not just for them, but also for the traditional, more conservative learners who, as you said, might have had some hesitation, because by then we would have created a strong word of mouth. We would have had enough advocacy built in, and they would have a lot of proof of concept in terms of learners doing this successfully online, getting outcomes. And that's where the hesitance starts breaking down for all the stakeholders involved. We have seen this happen multiple times with various programs that we've launched, where the hesitancy with parents, with hesitancy with students, hesitancy with universities, hesitancy with corporates over time has melted down, as we have started with this non-traditional set of learners, delivered strong outcomes for them, and we have used that proof of concept to go into more traditional spaces to ensure we can create more impact.
Great, thank you. And I completely agree. It takes time for us to get used to something which has changed. And once we're used to a particular mindset, you have to give it time for people to get familiar with a fresh mindset. But on the same point and to the same question, Professor Mishra, from as Director of Law Admissions, do you see in legal education particularly some kind of unwillingness or hesitancy among students to engage in new forms of education which is not out in the classroom?
So thank you so much, Professor Prateek, and such a nice input from Phalgun. I will like to say when we are discussing redefining legal education, and particularly in a context when still COVID and related, I will say, virtual learning and online learning mode is on in the country. Digital learning is the future. If we are thinking about the future of not just legal education, but entire higher education, digital is the future. If we look at the legal profession as such, during COVID, both the High Courts and Supreme Court, I have data, 1.38 crore cases have been decided through virtual court hearings. And 1.38 crores is a large number. Out of that, 48 lakh were decided by the high courts and 89 lakh by the district courts. So a lot of districts even, though the ratio is much smaller in the districts where most of, and you know, our country, particularly the judicial system, our biggest problem is pendency of cases. So digital is the only way. When our lawyers are digital lawyers, our judges are digital judges, our courts are digital courts. And of course, the legal education has to completely transform itself to become, I mean, of course, we cannot manage without brick and mortar institutions. Our law school campuses, the campus education is paramount. But the digital influx has to be increased substantially. It's not the time when we studied law. I joined my LLB in the year 2000. And of course, we started with a yahoo.com email account, and slowly we learned even typing on computers. It was quite new to use computers and laptops. Those were times of cyber cafes where you pay on hourly basis. And this 2021, I think it's time when our entire legal and higher education system should be transformed, and the digital component should substantially take over, and that will help us. That's the only way I see. If I look at over, say, 5 crore pending cases in Indian courts, and that to be resolved, if pendency of cases, those kind of bigger issues to be solved, it can be done only through the digital way. It cannot be done manually. It cannot be, I mean, humanly impossible to achieve that kind of judicial targets to dispose of cases. So this is a very apt topic when we think about redefining legal education. Technology and digital transformation of law schools is the way.
Thank you, Professor Mishra. And that's very true. If we want to be as efficient a legal system as possible, we do need to have both physical and some kind of online platforms for both learning and for practicing. And that's a good segue to my next question, which I'm going to first request Professor Mishra to respond to this first before Phalgun gets to it. So as we know, legal education tends to be very, I would say, for lack of a better word, dry. And because the mode of learning that we have grown up on is a unidirectional oral transmission of information. One person in a classroom, the lecturer or the professor just talking, and that's it. And maybe questions at the end of the class. And that kind of encourages rote learning, which is not the correct approach. So, Professor Mishra, do you believe that that we can now, that this same approach can be used even in an online format, in a virtual format? That we should that same teaching practice can continue, or whether it's important to make use of ICTs, of communication and technology, of new digital tools to find new ways of teaching and learning?
So, Professor Prateek, COVID has taught us virtual learning, and online teaching in a hard way, but we have successfully mastered it almost. If we look at the Jindal Global Law School and University experience, our academic delivery in terms of classes, our examination, evaluation, submission of assignments, research papers, everything, almost 100% of academic delivery, as well as I mean, from a students and faculty point of view, has been done very successfully in an online format. So we can't, we can't reduce the importance of physical campus. Nothing can match that, and that is absolutely needed. But more and more digital component need to be added in our classrooms. And particularly when we are discussing global legal education cannot happen in brick and mortar campuses. Global legal education requires global interaction. It requires, scholars, academics, students from around the world interacting with each other. And that cannot be done on campuses. The travel could be limited. So digital is the key, how the global interactions, global engagement can happen in legal education in a big way. And we can globalize the way of learning of law. And in a way, the mission to produce not just law graduates capable for the domestic jurisdiction, but also lawyers who are actually global legal professional who can work successfully in any of the other jurisdictions with the same confidence and comfort.
Thank you, Professor Mishra. At this point, I'd like to welcome Professor Vivekanandan as our distinguished speaker to this session. Professor Vivekanandan, we were just discussing the point of how legal education traditionally is, it's a unilateral oral transmission of information with the professor doing all the talking and the students just listening and writing down notes. And whether that encourages rote learning, and what are the ways that we need to step out of that particular mindset. Just before I move to Phalgun, Professor Vivekanandan, would you have any thoughts about how the traditional model of legal education in terms of oral transmission, whether that should be copy pasted into a digital learning platform, or whether we need to explore new pedagogies?
Due apologies for little getting delayed today to join your program. And thanks to digital, I could join even 5 minutes, 10 minutes late. I presume if you had a physical program, I would have been stuck in Raipur, would have now come. So that is one way of demonstrating the utility what we're talking about digital. I come to 2-3 quick questions. As you said, the very first point is the problem is looking that as a binary, that physical or digital. That is never there in life. It is both. The moment you started writing letters in the good old yellow postcard, we have transformed communication and connectivity in a different way. And it is again, referral point is pandemic. Yes, pandemic had a big crisis management, I agree. Pre-pandemic also, the biggest connectivity among different stakeholders, thanks to Mark Zuckerberg, right? There is a lot of connectivity happen. So the question, what I'm telling is, it is sudden a kind of, I would rather say it is not a very major issue to talk about digital, but at the same time, since it's a continuous process of digital for more than a year and a half, I would say more than students coming to campus, we really want students to be in campus, right? Because the teachers, in my opinion, frankly, enjoyed the first semester without students because they thought, they can do a lot of work. They're not pulled here and there. But now I see all my teachers telling, sir, let's reopen fast because they also want that connectivity. So in such case, we are only talking about how judiciously we have to do. And second, I agree with you that cut and paste you said, that was existing pre-digital era also. PowerPoints have been mostly what you call as, 10-year-old edition PowerPoints used to be done. Because when PowerPoints came and all this LCD became a norm about a decade back, it was again a big excitement for students because you could really connect what you're talking. Then what happens is, over a period of time, students even predicted what will be the PowerPoint because except for some comma changes and few things, it was not happening. And students also had one more thing, sir, can I get your PPT? I used to steadfastly refuse in my early days. I tell them, this PPT is not for you, it is for me, right? So that I don't start in a highway and get into a gully. And then I don't know how to come back also sometimes. And this is a problem of serious professors that they will be totally out of track at times. So I said, my PPT tells me, this is my boundary, this is where I am. And also, I can take a recap when I come to the next class. A oral lecture, I can't really take a recap when I come next class. So I can even go back and tell this the last 2 slides, I put it and do that. So this problem existed before this digital platform in the sense, I call this is a live digital platform that was more what you call as a static digital work what we did. So naturally, it is a continuous innovation process that how people are going to really lose attention span in a digital thing, how to do that. And this many teachers do complain to me that they see a lot of squares with names and one doesn't know whether they are there or not, or whether they are reacting or not. So naturally, I tell if you are doing this digital classes, you need every 5 minutes, pretend you don't know something and ask the students, right? Don't ask them a quiz and so they don't want to answer. You tell, I am a little confused here, do you have any view? You will suddenly see a lot of views coming from the other side and you will know that people are there. So nutshell, I would say that we are managing a huge crisis. Hopefully, things will be under control, even though they're talking another wave. At least the preparedness is very heavy. Tracing methods, hospitals, norms, many things are in play. That's why they feel even there could be another wave, the impact could be nowhere compared to what happened 1 year back. The world is, different parts have really geared up. But now, as the point is, presuming best case scenario, January things subside and everybody we start our regular classes, and then or it continues. There again, why you are talking digital from global education? Let me tell you, any person living in Bangalore will know traveling from your home to a particular institute and lecturing and coming is almost like going to Singapore and coming. That is the kind of mess in many cities we are in. So naturally, it's not just global. Even I presume, my prediction is within the campus itself, you will have a lot of clarification session, mentoring, many things is going to happen where they sit in the room, they're going to connect with you. That is going to happen within, I'm telling about 40, 50 acre campuses, the average campus of law schools. So the other one, what you said is going to be really fantastic. What you call as, in fact, you're going to have more inputs thanks to digital platform. You're going to get people who would be wary of traveling. There are very erudite professors who are little elderly who don't want to travel, but they all will be able to do. This is an important case. I remember 10 years back, with which I'll give it to the other panelists, around more than a decade or that, Mr. Lakshmi Kumaran came to Nalsar University. Fantastic 2-part lecture he gave. So students were clamoring. I was also telling, sir, why don't you be a honorary professor and then teach us? Because tax, is a weakling in any law school. Because in the sense, if you're a little smart, market takes you away, right? Except for maybe Jindal can pay, others cannot pay. So this is the situation we were in. But Lakshmi Kumaran said, I would love to spend 2 hours with you. But which 2 hours in a day you tell me from Delhi I can spend with you, right? I'm ready to do 8 to 10 night or 7 to 9. Please arrange video classes. I will certainly love almost 5 days in a week. I will engage pro bono. I don't need to pay me. I will come. This I'm talking approximately 15 years maybe. At that time, it's all infrastructure is not easy, video conference, the technologies were also thing. So now I met Mr. Lakshmi Kumaran for a meeting we organized. Then I asked him, you promised me, 15 years back, you'll spend 2 hours. He said, Professor, 15 years back, my practice was not that great. Now my practice is quite a lot. I cannot spend 2 hours a day, he said. So why I'm bringing this humorously is this what you call as the very intelligent way of using this is going to augment many things. Probably we move faster thanks to the pandemic. And for that matter, I've been generally a critique of legal profession. They are generally having hesitation to be technology friendly. A typical lawyer has to have a lot of books at the back. Then only there is an image that is a lawyer, even though 100 times of the books can come into a palm top, but there is a perception issue that has been there for quite some time. But I do think the very younger generations are completely changing this notion. And so this debate is going to be some more time between, I call it quote unquote traditionalists, and then, what you call as the digital professors, right? But sooner or later, I think the traditionalists will, accept that this will be a reality sometime. And students definitely are postmodernist, I would call it, when it comes to, many of these digital platforms. So I really think it's going to do, and we are planning, even January reopening, we are planning few programs totally only online. Add on, but that we are not going to compromise some foundation, other thing which is going to be physical, because I do believe that it's like universities are not just learning place. It is, I call it as socializing place, right? You socialize. That's your space to understand each other, to get into problems with each other, how to solve the problems. All that growth happens in the terrain called university, and imparting skills is one part of the story. There is another part of a worldview which you are getting in being part of university. So let's all hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Vivekanandan. Those were the excellent points, and I completely agree on the disconnect. Even the initial days, it was quite difficult teaching online, and you didn't know if students were understanding things until you saw their answer scripts, and then maybe you realize the disconnect then. I'd like to ask Phalgun particularly on this line of thought about his a digital platform service provider. What kind of tools can we use in terms of education, particularly in legal education, which we can borrow, and as we move to this hybrid model that both Professor Vivekanandan and Professor Mishra discussed?
Great. I think just to add to what Professor Vivekanandan and Professor Mishra said, I think our view is that eventually there will be three sets of audience. There will be a small set of audience who will want to come on campus. That's their preference. They can afford to do that, and they will continue to have that experience. There will be a large set of audience that will do online for better access, and that will be fully online. But we believe that there will be a significantly larger set of people who will have this blended experience where even on campus, I would rather do some classes sitting in the hostel rather than come to class, because that's my way of engaging productively at this point of time. So I think we will need to enable that infrastructure, and the transition is not going to be easy for anybody. It's like e-commerce back in the day, 10 years back, when I was hesitant even to order a book online. Now I'm very comfortable ordering even a television online or clothes online, just because of the way the infrastructure and the entire thing has been built out. So I think that transition will take place, and I think it will just empower the faculty, the universities, and also a much larger set of students. Second, in terms of engagement, we do see it as a challenge that sometimes in these online classes, students are not engaged. But I think the first key aspect that we have seen is that it's all about how the faculty is driving the conversation. And we've shared these examples with all of our faculty, where we've said that, look, there are some people who do a brilliant job at it. It comes naturally to them in terms of, as Professor Vivekanandan just mentioned, pausing, asking questions, engaging the audience, and it's a very different style. And if there are other faculty members who struggle with it, who might be better at engaging in the classroom, but again, they struggle to do it online, right? So there, I think one of the things that we are really working on to improve is provide faculty with much stronger feedback in terms of which set of students are engaging, how they are engaging, and where they are dropping off. This is typically hard to do in an offline classroom, where, for example, I went to IIT Delhi, and I can say that most of my classes were not great, right? I was not paying attention in most of my classes, in all honesty. I was also in the classroom, but I was sitting at the back doodling or sleeping or doing something else or thinking of something else. So even in a classroom, sometimes the engagement is not fantastic. But the problem in the classroom is that the faculty never get that feedback. For us in the digital medium, what happens is we want to imagine the classroom as a classroom with a single student. And it's possible to do in the digital classroom, although there are 100 people, because you can, given the data that you have on that learner, we can figure out whether or not that learner is engaged based on when they join, when they drop off, is their video live, are they submitting their assignments on time, which questions they're getting wrong, how many minutes are they spending on the platform, how many times in a week they log in. So for example, even for the LLM program that we run, which is a duration program, we collect about 150,000 data points on the learner. Simple stuff like, does Professor Prateek like to study on the weekend or the weekday? Does Professor Mishra like to submit his assignments just in time, or does he do pre-work? So based on all of this, we can customize the experience for the learners and provide faculty with the feedback in order to develop their own style of teaching, which I think is a long process. But that's the process that we're trying to enable to make these classes more engaging. Obviously, the current technology that we have works to a certain extent in terms of Zoom, in terms of the tools that we have created ourselves. But again, there, I think there is a long way to go in terms of coming up with more exciting ideas and exciting infrastructure to be able to deliver this much better.
Phalgun, that's extremely helpful. And that actually brings me to the next question and link to the previous question. So of course, there are traditional modes of teaching in a classroom. And as you discussed, as you mentioned, that there are important things which digital platforms can provide us, such as data on what exactly the students, why they're nodding off in a class and not paying attention, and what is it that they're interested in. But are there certain tools, for example, can we use a flipped classroom model or breakout sessions Is that something which we can adapt to even a physical classroom? Do you think that makes sense? And or is there anything really in the traditional style of learning that can be retained, or do we just let that go completely and completely shift to a new style of learning?
That's for me, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
So I think we do see a lot of value in offline interaction. Right. So for example, most of our programs have a blended component where the one-way delivery you spoke about, Professor Prateek, earlier, we think a lot of that one-way delivery can happen online, either live or in an asynchronous format. But when it comes, I think there is a lot of value, both social interaction value and also intellectual brainstorming value that can come out of sitting in a room with 4 people and discussing ideas without too much structure and somebody just guiding that conversation. And I think that's where we find that these interactions are very helpful. And we try to facilitate them and say that, look, in a regular course, our belief is that about, let's take a 2-year master's course in any campus, right? We believe about 80% of that can be effectively done online in terms of, as I said, either with live delivery or with asynchronous delivery. But there is that 10, 15, 20% component, depending on the course and the pedagogy, where there is very strong value to doing things online, both in terms of driving student interaction and networks, and also faculty to student interaction. And most of this is about, as I said, one, challenging and learning from each other, which is a very important component of any educational experience. That is sometimes difficult to achieve online, at least with the current technology that we have. And second, having a more open-ended, unstructured, yet moderated conversation where you can let your mind run free and come up with ideas and then figure out how to take that forward in a more structured manner. I think those are the 2 elements where today online honestly does not do as good a job as what can happen if 4 people sit in a room. And that's where we are currently running those experiences offline. But technology is evolving so fast. Recently, I was doing a demo of a VR company in the US where everybody can wear a VR headset and they can be in 10 different places, but at the same time feel like they're in a classroom. So all of those interactions also, as I said, the technology and the infrastructure will evolve. We see that it is very possible that in 5 to 10 years, the 100% experience can be virtual, given how these things are evolving. But for now, these are the few components which we believe offline works better in terms of driving value.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And yeah, I mean, virtual reality education would maybe be very interesting in the future. I'd like to ask Professor Mishra, just in terms of traditional classroom style teaching, if you had to, if there was one nagging point which in the traditional classroom, which you would have preferred not to have been there back in your days in law school, what is it that we definitely need to let go of in terms of traditional classroom legal education?
So, Professor Prateek, that's a actually very interesting question, and it needs an honest answer. There is no way in a present or traditional scheme of things where there is a mandatory attendance requirement, physical attendance requirement put by Bar Council of India as per the legal education rules. And I would like to tell the audience and this panel, Professor Vivekanandan is a veteran, a stalwart, and he knows this. Our Bar Council rules, even today, it has not incorporated anything about virtual learning or online learning or online education in its system. So whatever legal education has to be imparted, it has to be imparted in the physical mode. And it's during the COVID time, the rules are actually created to enable law schools offering their courses and, so I'm talking about the LLB program, the bachelor's degree program. Now we need substantial, when our courts are making all those amendments, when the Court Fees Act has been amended in most of the states, and those where it is pending, the Supreme Court and of course the judiciary has instructed in a way, the governments are in the process of amending the Court Fees Act even the rules relating to e-filing. Supreme Court has even made e-Seva Kendra provisions at the High Court and District Court level. So this digital transformation is a must. We can't manage without it. And if we look at our times or the traditional model where I think the blended learning could be a great enabler in terms of those drawbacks, those issues which we faced in pure traditional system. For example, attending a particular lecture which may not be as interesting, or a subject which is you may not be liking to focus as a student, and you may not be in a position to attend classes at a particular time due to some issue, and you want to attend that lecture later. There was no way available. But in blended learning format, if the lecture is available at the same time in an online format, you can attend it at your convenience, say in the night or any time. It's not mandatory that during that particular 5 or 6 hours during the day, you have to be present on campus to ensure your attendance is actually recorded so that you are enabled to take your LLB exams. So when we are discussing redefining the future of legal education, my view is transformation of legal education requires a lot of digital component, and it's certainly sustainable. The virtual learning, the digital learning is a sustainable mode for the whole country, not just for legal education, entire higher education, and particularly in law, in social sciences, in humanities, in the non-STEM, non-medicine areas, where laboratories and something like physical involvement of individuals in labs and those things are not as mandatory requirement. And in future, our law schools have to train students not just for legal research and academic writing and reading and those things online, but even about e-filing, about virtual hearings, about virtual court system, about making them comfortable as a lawyer and legal professional in pure digital environment, because that is where it's going to be the future of not just legal education, but legal profession.
Thank you, Professor Mishra. I think all students in the audience would completely agree on the relaxation of the attendance requirement. And not just the students, it's also the teachers, because we are, of course, required to take attendance, and it does become a bit of an administrative hassle. And on that point, moving to Professor Vivekanandan on building teachers' capabilities, do you, of course, there are the students who are more tech savvy, so to speak, and more ready to adapt to tools, to technology. But a lot of teachers, a lot of law school professors, particularly older ones, they find it very difficult to adapt. So in terms of capacity building, how do you believe law schools can improve their teacher capacity building capabilities, and essentially help the teachers teach better in a blended mode?
Let us say that I take it for not older in the sense people above 50, 60, there are very good teachers who are still contributing, heavily. I leave them out. They're very minuscule, and they have always some people with them. There are followers, teachers who sit, because we used to go to classes when some iconic constitutional law teacher, few of us goes to hang around in the class. So they do have the help of others helping. But there's a middle range people whom I call that who are not early birds to technology. We did face certain issues in the beginning. For example, including not just digital transmission, about Turnitin, about many things. And we had some periodic workshops. At least 3 or 4 we conducted for, of course, my faculty's numbers are less. So we used to have a kind of training program where I involve much younger teachers who are, very much at ease. So I tell them to go sit with them, help to do. And in fact, we even contracted a lawyer come technician, in the sense technical guy who was part of HNLU alumni. He is now my consultant for my website and many things. He did some programs. We had not only that, we had peculiar programs like online submission. And then they say they submitted and we didn't get it here. And then we did some level of forensic investigation because I didn't simply want to allow a new type of fraudulent practice to start. So we do have tools. We went into there, asked them to open their PC, ask permission to give, and then check whether it really went out of their laptop. So that way we sent a message. Look, in the physical form of exam, you have invigilators hanging around. It's very easy. But in this type of online things, you have some different issues coming. So in the beginning, it was a little frustrating, but I would say that at least last one semester, I would say it's all solved in very big way. And now teachers are comfortable. So what it means is we have to do some kind of quick, fast tracking these issues and do. And as you said, there's only a fear of the unknown. Once you tell them it's such a ease, it can be done. I have seen many teachers do that. And now I would even say, earlier we were running around some outside design experts for posters. Now I find half a dozen teachers for their programs create really impressive posters. So how did you learn? They said, sir, we had some websites. We are now part of Poster My Wall, and we keep doing this. So as you said, that it's a matter of just crossing that small fear barrier, and suddenly they will see there is a lovely world of technology that side and which they can use. And so I don't think so it's an insurmountable problem, but we need to keep some periodic, what you call as training or handholding, which I think people will easily cross over.
Thank you, Professor Vivekanandan. That's very helpful. That actually takes me to, of course, the fact that what you discussed, that there are so many options which are available suddenly for a teacher, so many tools to use. And that also ties into my next question, which is that, which I'll request Phalgun to answer first. With regard to education and education technology service providers, over the last few years, so many have mushroomed. There are so many platforms of LMS, of learning management systems across the world. And is there any consistency which you see is being followed by each of these platforms in terms of imparting education? Or if there isn't, is there a need for consistency? Or is it better that that universities and teachers get to pick and choose what they want?
Sure. So, Professor Prateek, I think the way we see it is that there are some standard features that come with any LMS, right? And those I think are consistent and standard pretty much across any LMS that you would use. But I think given the way this has spiked over the last 24 months because of COVID and the usage, there are a lot of learnings for all of us to implement and innovate in terms of how these LMSs can perform and the kind of flexibility that it can give faculty and universities. So let me just give you an example, right? One of our partners and the faculty came up and said that, look, typically in a class, I do a cold call, right? So I just say that, look, I spot this one student in the class and I ask him a question and he has to answer it in 30 seconds. So this is generally a pedagogical tool I use to engage my students better. Now, can we do this online? This would not be a standard feature in most LMSs. But then we said, look, is it helpful? If it does help, then we will build it into our LMS as part of one of the features. Similarly, there are, for example, when students are doing a technology or a data course. Now, a lot of times, some of the LMSs do not allow students to code on the platform seamlessly. They have to go to another console and they have to code. And then it's two different platforms. So it's a kind of a disparate experience. So now we have said, let's invest in creating something that is integrated so that the whole experience is end-to-end seamless. The data collection and the learnings from that can be integrated. So we see that we have a full 100 people technology team that is constantly just working on getting feedback from our faculty and university partners and saying, how can we improvise on making this LMS better and efficient every day, so that, as I said, as technology evolves, we are able to provide the kind of support that will ensure that the quality of this learning and the interactivity and experience of this learning is as good as on campus or even better moving forward. So I think it's a constant evolutionary journey. It's just still very early days. So I think while there will be some basic consistent features, on top of that, I think almost everybody is trying to innovate to see how we can provide more tools and flexibility to faculty and universities, and give them the comfort that, look, we are not shoeboxed into forcefully using something, but we have the freedom to say that, look, this is what I am comfortable doing. This is how I'm comfortable teaching. Can I do this on this platform? So I think it'll keep evolving. And I think it's going to be a fairly fast-paced evolution for the next few years.
Thank you. So those are some excellent points. And I'm sure it's, of course, a very competitive landscape in the education technology industry. And one of the reasons, as you've correctly pointed out, is there is huge scope for hybrid learning to become better than traditional classroom learning, because physical classrooms do have their limitations. And on that point, what I wanted to, I'm going to direct this next question to Professor Mishra, and then it can be answered by everyone else. Do you see any kind of pushback from students in terms of they are now too comfortable with sitting at home, maybe because of health reasons or otherwise, but they're a little too comfortable with the availability of options that has come with hybrid learning, and they might not want to come back to the physical classroom?
So here I will go with what Professor Vivekanandan said, that the first semester of due to COVID was fine for faculty and for the student both. But now nobody wants to be in the same online situation. Everybody wants to come to the campus. And I mean, I completely agree that the university campuses are not just the place of learning, but also socializing, or whatever better word we use, the peer learning and learning from the environment, and in a way, holistic development of an individual can be done only on a campus and not purely through online learning. So this blended mode, I believe, is the future. Blended mode means the technology, and there has to be a balance to be created. We can't allow students to, for that matter, if there are, possibilities to take, say, all the lectures virtually, or all the lectures compulsorily in the physical classroom. It has to be a mix. It has to be a very judicious mix, which is actually making things better for both the faculty and the student.
Thank you, Professor Mishra. Professor Vivekanandan, you've been an educator for decades. Would you believe that this hybrid learning is possible in legal education, particularly given the unique nature of how law is and how text heavy it is?
Yeah, I would say, is it possible in legal education? The question should be around, it's only in legal education it's possible compared to science or technology, because that has an entirely different physical component. Here, what the lawyers, would-be lawyers miss is about the whole dynamics of, moving with others, what do you call us, picking up the arguments, putting it, that they may miss. But when you say the education quotient, it's quite easy for legal education to do this. So coming back to the point, the students themselves, very interesting, when we said we will open up in between, they said we will come, we will do online class sitting from hostel, right? And then I said, that's okay, no problem, because classrooms you have to give social distance. That is not feasible because classrooms are made for X number of people. But then we did open up, but did not come, because then I realized we condition what we put is, once you come to campus, you cannot go out even once, right? They thought that is not possible. At least at home, they can go out and come. And coming back to this space, what I keep telling people is most of the average Indian student lives in a 1000 SFT, 1200 SFT space with the entire family. They love the family, all that. But that is not the space when you compare to a campus. A campus is as it's, a different mind space, I call it. It is a mind space which is not feasible at home. So all of us also presume that all of us work from home, teachers. I think, we also at a point of time, we are constrained to be in a smaller space. So my proposition is students with, for example, one simple example, out of 900 students, we understood some statistics in my university, around 450 have done a Coursera course. Coursera gave a limited offer, free. 450 students have enrolled and completed, which means they are swimming beautifully on this, this type of platform. But as Professor Mishra pointed out, it is a judicious mix, which depends upon institute to institute and the type of programs offered and the kind of network what institutes have. But all of them need a minimum digital infrastructure now, which was not there earlier. Now everybody talks about digital infrastructure. And let me tell you, frankly, we invested about 10, 15 lakhs just before pandemic on video conferencing. Now with the Zoom and other things, everyone is carrying a video conferencing with them. Now, I don't know what to do with that huge investments I made, because at that time, these things were there, but we never even looked this side for a WebEx or Zoom. Suddenly, WebEx and Zoom has become, I'm giving two names, but there could be others, which are what you call as non-negotiable, I call it, right? Non-negotiable, whether you do online or not, this license people are taking, and I'm sure always technology prices come down with a large number of users coming in. So my proposition, as I said, that we are debating, but the debate will slowly fade away, where everybody will find, their own, level of the mixture, whether it's going to be 70-30, whether it's going to be 50-50 or 80-20. This all depends about individual or the diverse institutes and their, approaches.
Thank you, Professor Vivekanandan. I'm now going to move to the audience questions, and we have just a few minutes left. So I request that our answers just be as precise as possible. So the first question that we've received is, if we consider this digital transfer of permanent mode of imparting legal education, at least for the next few years, is it going to impact the education of students who reside in remote areas of India, or may not have enough resources to access the ongoing legal education, digital legal education? Do you believe that it is the institution's responsibility to ensure that the education they are aiming to impart reaches these students by providing sufficient resources? Professor Vivekanandan, I know you've worked on access to legal education in the past. Would you have any thoughts on this particular point?
So can I get the crux of this question again?
Essentially, how do you ensure access to legal education in remote people who, assuming that we are continuing with this mode of learning, some kind of hybrid mode of learning, and how would a person in remote areas of India who does not have good internet, who maybe does not have electricity also on a regular basis, what is it that we can do, universities can do, educational institutions can do to assist those students?
Okay, that is a question we face not only in terms of class, when the consortium of law school wanted to conduct their examination, whether it was even at a point we thought online, then this was a major concern about access issue. So as we said, the access issue was there pre-pandemic also. But it has become acute because the whole physical thing has been shut down. Then you become dependent only on this. So some of the schools, what we experimented was sending CD-ROMs, by post, etc. So that they do have. That is only a temporary solution. So probably I was even contemplating that I'm collecting X amount of fee for X amount of infrastructure. But if I'm not actually having the utility of that through students, whether I can, give them, I give them a concession with which you can buy your bandwidth and do a few things. But as I said, it is not a quick fix solution. I only remember an interesting anecdote which could be fitting here. In the early 1900s, it was Ford, the owner of the Ford company, when he announced a grand scheme that he had a model called T, which he was developing. I'm talking when automobile itself is not part of the psyche. He said every American should have one car. That is the announcement he made. And people really laughed at him because cobblestones, roads in New York and many places had horse-drawn carriages. And horse dung will be there everywhere. Methane gas used to come. People used to have terrible things. They said, they called, you are talking about a machine, which is called a car at the time, a real, kind of inventive thing. And you're taught, with that, have you ever seen the roads? And you're talking about expensive cars in the roads. Then Ford did one answer. He said, let expensive cars come first. Good roads will come next. It is not the other way, he said. People who buy cars now, they will clamor with the municipality to put the good roads because they want the cars to run properly. So sometimes what happens is that we don't ideally create a IT infrastructure and then move on to something. Something we have moved on, then you will find, as they say, necessity is the mother of invention. Suddenly you will find some working model, some finance model, many things can come into place to mitigate this access issue. So the answer to the question, it's a concern, but it is not something which cannot be solved. It can be solved because we don't have a magic wand to do a few things to go back and forth. So it is, as I said, when these things roll out, then we have to hit the road and running and make something. So we need to concentrate on that segment, but not but to imagine we'll come to standstill and roll back. I don't think so. In the past history, for anything for that matter, it has happened like that.
So Prateek, I know we are out of time, but just one thing I wanted to add to what Professor Vivekanandan just said, I think it's very important, is I think infrastructure gets built over time. It won't happen overnight. And that's where having the right car is important for people to push for the right roads to happen. And in that context, I think one of the things that we're talking about right now is saying that a student from a village X who was on campus, now that he has gone back, is not able to get the same kind of access because of this, right? That is definitely a problem and we need to solve it. But one of the other things we need to also understand is that there is a village Y in which there are 50 people who never were coming to campus, but this is giving them the opportunity to have the same kind of experience online. So while the better roads get built, in the long term, this is a much more equitable and democratized solution as compared to expecting all these places to have campuses, because that is never going to happen. If they're going to reach quality education at scale, online is the best way to do it. Right now, the infrastructure is not great, but that's our only hope in terms of getting it to the kind of penetration we need.
Thank you very much. We are, as you correctly pointed out, we are out of time. And most of the other questions, I note that we've answered them in some way or the other already during our discussion. There's one question which I think I'd like to address just regarding what if there's a constant back and forth? What if another variant comes? And we know, of course, there's news of the Omicron variant currently. And what if we have this knee-jerk reaction of physical classroom and then 3 months later again online and again physical? So I think all of us would agree on this, that we need to not have either online only or either physical only. The future of the virtual sustainability of legal education really is some kind of a hybrid learning model. And that is, of course, applicable to all education. But as Professor Vivekanandan correctly pointed out, applicable specifically to legal education, because if the legal profession is adapting, why not legal education? All right. With that, I'd like to thank all of our distinguished speakers for taking time out today and for joining us.